will the African continent even be able to survive by selling its raw materials? That's a major problem. The sellout of Nelson Mandela. Yes, it's a bourgeois leadership. You may as well face the reality of it. The day Nelson Mandela, as a condition of leaving prison, promised those whites that their properties would not be nationalized and would not be taken back and redistributed among the natives of South Africa. The game was up then. Yes, you may as well face the reality. And we have this kind of situation all over the continent of Africa, where the original, yes, and it's a joke to talk about Namibia being liberated, with 75% of its most arable land still owned by whites, with this wealth being owned by whites. What kind of liberation are you talking about? When you look at Zimbabwe, that negotiated a so-called treaty or independence, and the whites promised them that after 10 years they would turn the land loose. And when the 10 years were up, the other white nations said, hey, forget about it. And now the African farmers and other people are still without land. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to learn that you got to fight a war to the death. You got to fight a war until your enemy surrenders so that you can dictate the terms. If you fight a war and then you've got to sit at the table and really go through negotiations, you have not won. Now, if you can't dictate the terms of peace, you have not won the war. You see, and we got a lot of that kind of stuff going on in the African situation today. Yes, all over. Because the African situation is worldwide. Doesn't matter where you are. The same politics that inheres in America, inheres in Africa, Central South America, everywhere. It's the same game. Because you have the same what? Domination. Yeah, the domination is global. So you have the same kind of problems. You're saying you have to face that as a reality. If this nation, this South African so-called nation, leaves intact, the white ownership of property and so forth, it's going to change the whole of that continent, because that nation will become the economic engine of the continent. And the African nations on the rest of the continent will trade with it, and in many ways become economically associated and dependent on it, which will permit then an even deeper penetration by whites and others into the continent as a whole, under the bogus title of a multiracial society. You have to wake up. You cannot let any leader become a sacred cow to the point where you forget how to perform a realistic analysis on the situation. Because ultimately it is your individual lives and the life of our people that is a question here, not the glory and power of an individual person or leader, but of the people themselves. And so we see this crisis of leadership all over the place. And it is time now for us to move toward its resolution. I think we are in a better position at this point because, unlike Du Bois and Washington and the others who were, in a sense, at the front end of these issues, we have had now 80, 90 years to see what happened. We can measure results. Therefore, we can take an empirical approach, an empirical analysis, an analysis based on experiment, an analysis based on actual experience, an analysis that looks at the NAACP's programs and look at the results, that looks at the programs of other leaders and look at the results that they wrought. So we don't have to guess, and we don't have to be quite as theoretical as we used to be. We can say, let's see what the results bear out. And let's see if this form of leadership can be justified any longer based on its results. And this is what we have to measure. An interesting case, we'll be back to him shortly. To a great extent then, we're going to have to look at the issue of power, a word that we've been taught as people to avoid and to think is immoral. And it is a pity that we've been led in this direction. Because, ladies and gentlemen, power is the crucial measure of the effectiveness of leadership, as to whether that leadership empowers the people. Because we have to recognize that the primary source of the host of problems that confront African people the world over and in America is powerlessness.
All right. That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
We are suffering from not using our potential as a people.
That's right.
Yes. Powerlessness. If we were able to create jobs, but able is the essence of what? Power. To be able what? To. The ability to. You see, power is created in terms of resistance, the ability to move against resistance, to expend energy and to focus energy in changing circumstances in terms of one's own benefits. This is what power is about. Power is necessary to all living things. It is the essence of life. If you do not have any power, you are not alive. That's right. It takes power for you to chew your food. It takes power for you to digest it, to convert it into nutrients so that you may continue to survive. It takes power for you to stand up against the resistance of gravitation. It takes power for you to earn a little living from the earth and everything else. You have to have what? Ability. You have to be able to do those things necessary to maintain life. You've seen people, sometimes unfortunate people, like some of the children in Somalia and people in Somalia who do not even have the power to chew, and who must die unless they're intravenously fed, because they no longer have the power to even masticate the food in their mouths or to digest it. There is no life without power. And therefore, the pursuit of power is necessary for the pursuit of life and for maintaining the viability of life. So don't let anyone deceive you into thinking that there's virtue in powerlessness. And just as power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, powerlessness corrupts and also corrupts absolutely. A lot of the corruption that you see out on these streets, the shooting and the killing and the selling of drugs and so forth, the muggings, the stealings, the robberies, and all of this is a result of powerlessness. And powerlessness corrupting a people and corrupting a culture. Yes. Creating terror and horror in our communities. Because we are not able, we have not empowered ourselves to provide our young people with what? Jobs and alternatives to mugging, to robbing, to stealing, to terrorizing. Look at the difference between those, in terms of crime, between those groups who own property, who have a control over economic resources and so forth, who exercise political power and economic power in this society, and those of us who do not. And you can see immediately then that the power itself, powerlessness itself, becomes a source, therefore, of corruption. And therefore, if we are to change the nature of our system, we must change from powerlessness to power. And ultimately, though, social power comes out of the relationship among people and persons. Social power is in essence collective. We have to keep that in mind, because we normally think of individuals as powerful. But individuals gain their power from being backed up by a powerful group.
That's right.
Yes. Individual whites are not powerful.
That's right.
What power they possess or seem to possess is because they represent the power of their group.
That's right.
The individual cannot be separated from his or her group. In fact, the individual is a social creation to begin with.
All right.
The individual cannot exist in a vacuum. You have a language that you share with millions of other people. You have attitudes, appetites, and all of these other things that are the result of your doing what? Living socially among another group of people. You have desires and so forth that have not only been generated from your social interaction with other people and living in a social system, but desires and wishes that can only be satisfied by that social system. You cannot satisfy them all by yourself at all. And yet we are deceived in this country talking about what? Individualism, as if all people can be an island unto themselves and yet meet their every need of the people. So ultimately, social power is in essence collective, and it involves two essentials: intentionality, by which we mean purpose and motive, and resources. When people have intentions, motives, and purpose, and they bring resources to bear in their situation to solve a particular problem. One of the things that we are dealing with then in this community, that we're dealing with in our volume on Blueprint for Black Power, is the fact that black people in America have tremendous resources. I talk about in this book the fact that we are a nation of people who are from 10 to 80% of the population of 117 of America's largest cities. We have 50 to 60 cities of which we are essentially about 50% of the population of those cities above 100,000. We are the majority population in about 17 of those cities. And those cities are scattered across this country. They're connected by highways, roads of all type, railways, riverways, air routes, all types of things, all of the things necessary for a nation to function, we have available to us. Fax machines, telephones, all of this we have as African people. And we have what? Money. W.E. Du Bois stated very clearly in The Dusk of Dawn that if black people could get only a fraction of their internal market, their influence on the economic and political life of themselves and America would be decisive. Now, when I first looked at that statement, I thought it was an exaggeration until I started analyzing the figures. And we started working with the figures. We're talking about a people who earn over $300 billion. Yes. But recognize, as I've told you before, the issue is not so much what you earn, but what? What you produce. Because you get paid only a fraction of what you produce. So if we're getting paid $300 billion, we must be producing well over $1 trillion or more dollars as a people. Yes. And yet we have a business section that only collects about $20 billion as African people. That means African people in America are spending over $300 billion, and the total receipt of black businesses amount only to $20 billion. But you see, I'm an optimist. I don't ask, is the glass half empty? I say it's what? It's half full. And I recognize that oaks from acorns grow. And I recognize then that that means that African people are spending less than 5 cents with black businesses. And that says then if we are spending less than 5 cents with black businesses and yet we're providing them with $20 billion, what if we spent 10 cents?